Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 6th of November 2017, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me today in the studio, Patrick Henningsen from 21st Century Wire. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
Lots going on in the news at the moment. Fantastic 21 Wire, Sunday Wire last night. We covered some of this. Really, if you look at the front page of the BBC at the moment, what have we got? We've got some scandal over global tax. We've got some scandal over sex and the Tories, and almost nothing about what's going on in Saudi Arabia at the moment. This is an incredible situation, Patrick. Many people, a couple of dozen people, I believe, being arrested so far, including a prince. We've got a helicopter crash, as you can see on screen at the moment. This helicopter was carrying several Saudi officials who seem to be heading towards the Yemen border for some reason. Were they trying to leave the country before they were picked up? This is a bit unclear at the moment. The cause of the crash, they say, is still unknown. And we have this gent picked up. This is Prince Alawid bin Talal, if I pronounced that correctly, who is an investor who has stakes in Twitter, Citigroup, so a very significant party.
Yeah, he's one of the leading billionaires in the Saudi oligarchy. And in total, the arrests, Mike, including 11 princes, 10 ex-ministers, 4 current ministers, and many others are currently held in a hotel alongside the former Lebanese Prime Minister, Saud Hariri. So it's potentially world-changing events here, Mike, but you wouldn't...
Former?
Yeah.
When did that happen?
That happened on Saturday, I believe.
So this is all very coincidental.
Yes, but you wouldn't know it if you're reading the European press or the British press, because it seems to me touching of the knees seems to be the #1 story in Britain.
Well, in the meantime, a missile was launched from Yemen. This is one story that it was launched from Yemen towards Riyadh. This is what Boris Johnson had to say. He said, "I'm shocked and horrified by the attempted missile strike on Riyadh, which was a deliberate targeting of a civilian area." I'm shocked and horrified, or perhaps not, at the sheer hypocrisy of this statement, Patrick, because what's going on in Yemen? Is that not the deliberate targeting of civilians on a mass scale by Saudi Arabia?
Every day since March 2015, actually, Mike. So this comment by Boris Johnson is quite perplexing that he would make such a statement. But then again, we're not surprised with this foreign minister.
No, but we don't have to worry, because the United Kingdom remains committed to supporting Saudi Arabia as it faces regional crises and security threats. The UK government condemns in the strongest terms this attempt to attack this attempted attack and the actions of those involved. Unbelievable.
What is the commitment besides selling arms, by the way?
That is the commitment.
To Saudi Arabia.
Yes, that is it. And of course, as a result of all this, the Saudis have now closed Yemen completely, with airports, seaports, land access closed. So the situation is building, and I'm delighted to say we're joined today by geopolitical analyst Marwa Osman. Welcome to the program, Marwa. I believe you're in Lebanon, and thank you very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So what are your thoughts on what's going on in Saudi at the moment?
Well, Patrick was trying to put out the numbers quite properly when he said that there was 11 princes and there are more than 20 senior Saudi figures who are also arrested in the Ritz-Carlton. And to our surprise, we're still under the shock that our prime minister was summoned there for some sort of a meeting. It was a double meeting that happened twice per 1 week. He got summoned 24 hours after he went back to Saudi Arabia, and after he went back to Lebanon, he was summoned back 24 hours later, and he just disappeared. We have no idea what's going on. We have no idea where he went, what happened to him. We just saw a video of him giving out his resignation live, and it was not even live, it was recorded on TV, and it was strictly the Saudi Al Arabiya TV channel. And then we just stopped hearing anything from him. No tweets, no phone calls. He didn't even call his family members. The president had no idea. The speaker had no idea. So we all were actually worried. We didn't know what happened to our prime minister. Never mind that we may bicker in politics or we may have certain differences, but this is the Lebanese prime minister. He was summoned to Saudi Arabia, and now we don't know what he's doing and where he is. And most probably he is in the Ritz-Carlton, because last night after the speech of Said Hassan Nasrallah, just 1 hour later, when Said Hassan Nasrallah was expressing concern over where the whereabouts of our prime minister is, and then just 1 hour later he tweeted a photo, which we don't know the timing of the photo. We don't know if he is actually tweeting the photo. And what we were able to see, that the photo was in the position, or in the maybe the set behind him resembles a lot the set of the rooms of the Ritz-Carlton. So everything is a bit weird when it comes to our prime minister. We have no idea what's going on. That's the same thing with what's happening with the princes. We are talking about senior prince, very important princes in Saudi Arabia, like Al-Walid bin Talal, whose net worth is more than $18 billion. So I don't know what bin Salman is thinking, why he would do that to his own cousins. But yet again, it's Saudi Arabia. We can't really understand what's going on. But yet again, what happened yesterday night with the helicopter, with that the person who is responsible of Al-Asir, which is the bordering area, the southern bordering area in Saudi Arabia with Yemen. He died alongside the alongside several officials and members of the municipality of that area. All of them just gone. We don't know how, but we did take a look at the wreckage of the helicopter, and it definitely suggests some sort of an explosion, some sort of a target, because if it had just fell, maybe we would have found something, but nothing's there. It's just wreckage, that small pieces of the helicopter. And then yet again, just I think it was 2 hours ago that we heard that one of the bin Fahd princes, I forgot his first name, but he is a bin Fahd prince, and he died because 2 days ago there was some sort of an exchange of fire at a certain area in the palaces, in the palaces area in Riyadh, and there was an exchange of fire with the security forces, with the security of that prince, and he got shot, and just 2 hours ago he died. So there's an entire purge going on in Saudi Arabia, again, family members against one another. No one is talking about it except the media, certain media, maybe more the Lebanese media more than others, because we are concerned about the whereabouts of our prime minister. But other than that, you could just see an op-ed piece here or a report there, but with no specific details of what's going on, because simply we don't know how to get the information. If any reporter tries to get there, he might not get out alive.
That's right. And when I look at Western coverage, particularly British coverage of this, Marwa, we see suggestions that perhaps this is the Crown Prince consolidating his power. I mean, there was a palace coup back in June. Do you think this is related? And do you think the mainstream media is just clutching at straws, or do you think this is a consolidation of power?
Yes, I think this is phase 2 of the coup that happened against bin Nayef early this summer, and the heads of the people, or the princes, the top princes that were arrested 2 days ago, were actually part of the alliance with Prince bin Nayef, who was supposed to be the crown prince after the current king. But we also on TV how bin Salman supposedly took the okay and the blessing from bin Nayef by kissing his abaya. That's a tradition that if you kiss the pocket of the person in front of you, it's weird, I'm sorry, but if you kiss the pocket of the person in front of you, that means you're getting their blessing to take their place. So that's what happened. But what also was happening was, in the background of the footage, there were security personnel with guns on their waist. Why would there be 2 princes in a room and people with guns there? That's really weird. And then bin Nayef no longer exists on the planet. He tried several times to get relocated out of Saudi Arabia. He was denied. And now we see what's going on with the other princes. I don't think that this will just end, let's say, just positively. I don't know how it will end, but let's say it's not going to end positively, because we are talking about 15,000 princes. That's the number of princes that are found in Saudi Arabia. Not to forget that each prince have their own tribe behind them. They have tribes that are their local, maybe in the local area that they are living in, or the tribes that they belong from their mother's side and from their maybe uncle's side. along with the other tribes related to the father's side, which are all royal family. So we are talking about a huge number of people. We are actually talking about a population. So if this continues, and we have been seeing, but we cannot confirm the credibility of the footage that we are seeing, but we did see a lot of street protests with cars, not people on the street, actually cars just standing there, and fire from all around them. We saw a lot of buildings catching fire. All of these are videos on Twitter, but you have to write the hashtag that is written by the Saudis themselves, which is in Arabic, more of a Saudi language. It's in Arabic, but it has the Saudi accent in it. So you have to have access to that hashtag to see those videos, which are there only for a small amount of time before they get deleted. So I don't know what we are looking at here, but we are definitely, something is happening in the country, and we cannot tell what it is, what is happening, how many, if there's a number of dead people or not, if there are street fights or not. We cannot tell because we cannot know. And at the same time, if you ask anyone from the official ministries in Saudi Arabia, they will all tell you everything's fine, everything's okay, despite the fact that today, with the opening of the what do you call it, the stock exchange market in Saudi Arabia, it was a horrible opening. So something is happening. Add to that the Burkan H2H that was launched from Yemen and hit for the first time Riyadh International Airport, which is also a huge deal. We just saw that as a minor headline across the world saying, oh, Yemen is picking a fight with Saudi Arabia. And just that morning, there was another massacre in Sada that was made by the Saudi Air Force. So it's just cuckoo land around here. No one gets anything. In the outside world, no one knows anything.
Yeah.
Well, that's that. I'm afraid we've lost Marwa at that point.
Lost the connection with Marwa, but great commentary. We got her back.
Yes,
we got her back. So Marwa, just a couple of quick questions. We just have a few minutes, so we'll try to run through these questions quick. How the Saudi royal family has been able to survive for this long is kind of the power sharing arrangement that the family has, and the fact that they haven't plunged the knives into each other's back for so long is the reason why they're still in power. Do you think that we're looking at a potential inter-family and it could turn into an intertribal civil war, basically, that this could actually cascade?
Yes. It can actually turn into one if bin Salman doesn't watch his step any further. But there's another factor, there's another variable that actually put Saudi Arabia on the map, and it's the outside alliances that they have been able to make only because they have money and oil. We all heard what Donald Trump, for example, was saying in his campaign against Saudi Arabia. He was saying that Saudi Arabia is the kingdom of terror, and it's the kingdom of Wahhabism that is spreading the ideology of ISIS. He got to be president. He was still just having that stick in his hand and doing like this for the Saudis. And then he was invited to the kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and he got his 500 billion X whatever number of dollars, which is a huge number that the kingdom cannot actually afford to pay at once. They have to pay on several years for Donald Trump in order to stay within budget. And then all of a sudden, Saudi Arabia is a home of democracy. Bin Salman is trying to change everything in the social life. They are trying to take care of the extreme Wahhabi ideology, and it's not working properly because of the second variable, which is the alliances made inside of Saudi Arabia. Because Saudi Arabia came to be, and the kings of Saudi Arabia came to be because of an alliance that happened between bin Abdul Wahhab and Mohammed bin Al Saud. We are talking about the late 1800s, when they made a pact that Wahhabism will be the religion, which is by Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, which is taken by Ibn Tamim. So they made a pact that the religion would be a Wahhabi religion of Muhammad Abdul Wahhab, and the ruling would be the family of Al Saud as being Muhammad bin Saud, the first king. So if that balance is to be broken, then most definitely we are going to see bickering, probably civil war. Add to that the drag that's happening within the royal family. Everybody is bickering, everybody is fighting now. Princes are dying, helicopters are falling, princes are getting detained. I don't think that the people there, or maybe the royal family there, will allow and accept such a brutal way to handle things, because this is the first time this has ever been handled this way inside of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They do handle it this way with the public, or with their enemies, but they don't do that to one another or against one another. And bin Salman seems not to care. He's even sent out a voice this morning via WhatsApp, and he was literally threatening everyone. He was threatening the users of social media that any administrator who is caught having dialogue with Qataris or Yemenis of any sort, dialogue of any sort, via social media or via his phone, he will get arrested, he will have to pay a fine, and he will be jailed. So it's a matter of putting people under certain pressure that limits their movement, because there is no freedom to begin with in Saudi Arabia, but it would limit their movement. So I don't think this would be okay with the public right now, with all the eyes being on Saudi Arabia as well.
I think we're just about out of time on this for now, Patrick. But just one final thought, Marwa, because I mean, Saudi Arabia, of course, absolutely awash with weapons from the UK and from the United States. So should there be any kind of intertribal strife of this kind, it's not likely to be pleasant.
Well, to begin with, I'd like to apologize if you're hearing that's my 2-year-old. She's having a fit. I don't know why, so I'm sorry about that. The second thing, well, look, if you look at the statements that were issued by whether Theresa May or Cameron before her, or Boris Johnson, who was appalled by the launching of a ballistic missile from Yemen into Riyadh after more than 2 years of pounding Yemeni people and civilians in specific and killing them. It's more than 40,000 civilian deaths. Do not look at the numbers of the UN because they're not right. Go talk to the Ministry of Health inside of Yemen, and they will tell you numbers are beyond horrific. So if you want to talk about this, I think this is a responsibility that would fall on the shoulders of the British people, in general, and the Western public in general, because if they don't push enough on their governments to stop this sort of weapon sales and maneuvering with such a dictatorship, such a brutal regime in the region that is the source of all the horror in the region. Look at what they have done all across the world. So I think that if the public doesn't put real pressure and real stress on their governments, I don't think that we will get anywhere near the governments, the Western governments, or Britain in specific, stopping the arms sales to Saudi Arabia. It has to come from the people, or else it's not going to happen, because no one really is voicing their concern. Maybe one or two in the House of Representatives, but no one is actually doing anything about it. Report after report, numbers just increasing, the deaths, the massacres, the malnutrition, the diseases. And no one is still doing anything. And now after that ballistic missile, you just said, they are now on lockdown. Nothing can go in, nothing can go out. So it's a genocide. It has been a genocide for the past 2.5 years. But now, what's now going on, I don't think anyone would be able to survive this.
Yeah. Okay, Marwa Osman, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully we'll see you on again in the not too distant future. Thank you. Patrick, let's move on to Iraq. I do apologise. And you are just back from this conference, the Conference for International Dialogue and Terrorism. Vanessa Bailey was there as well, and we'll be speaking to her tomorrow. So hopefully we'll get her perspective on this. But tell me about this conference. Who organised it, and what was it about? Yeah,
this conference was organised by the Prime Minister. The Office of the Prime Minister, Haider al-Abadi, in Baghdad. So this is an international conference on the dialogue for terrorism. There are a number of delegates there from all over the world, and also in Iraq, including military officials as well. From the United States, from Britain, delegates from Britain, including, I believe, a member of Parliament as well. Lord Purvis was there, right, from Scotland. And a number of other important delegates and journalists and voices from around the world. But the point of this was really to give an informational update on the battle against ISIS in Iraq, and is hugely informative, especially for myself. Vanessa was there. She'll elaborate more on some of the more deeper aspects on your program tomorrow, including the massacre in Tikrit. But I was able to speak on a panel. This is with Patrick Coburn, who's one of the senior international correspondent for The Independent there, and a number of other presenters, including militia leaders and brigade leaders, giving an update on basically trying to understand the causes of extremism, how ISIS was allowed to flourish, and also how they were allowed to achieve the surprise military victories they did in June 2014, and then what was the reaction by Iraq. And so it was quite a phenomenon, Mike. And the sad thing about this in Western media terms is this phenomenon has been totally muted in the Western media. The United States has been carrying on like it's been leading the fight against ISIS in Iraq from the air, and nothing could be further from the truth. The fight against ISIS has happened on the ground, Mike. This is the same in Syria, but we know more about that because we've seen more coverage of that. So the Ayatollah, Grand Ayatollah Sistani, on days after Mosul fell, issued a fatwa, basically deputizing over 100,000 Iraqis. So we met the leader of the Hashd al-Shabi, or the People's Mobilization Unit's military leader, Mohandes, Abu Mendy Mohandes, and we have a picture here of a press conference. And so he gave a private audience to Western journalists and also Middle Eastern journalists here, and really explaining what the PMUs, the People's Mobilization Units, were all about, and the various battles that they're fighting in. He actually took time off the battlefield. I think they had ongoing operations in Anbar province and Hawija and other areas that are currently being the last battlegrounds against ISIS. They've managed to, the PMUs, the People's Mobilization Units, have managed to take back a huge amount of territory in a period of time, but at a high price. And when we were in their headquarters, these are some of the military commanders here, the martyrs, who've lost their lives in the fight against ISIS. Massive sacrifices, and the price they paid has been huge, but this is a huge victory. And what's amazing about this, Mike, this is a real victory for the Iraqi people. And after the U.S. Bombing, invasion, and occupation of that country, you can imagine what this means to the people of Iraq. And so sadly, that glory has been robbed from them in the Western media, who've basically characterized this victory as the work of Iranian-backed militias, in a derogatory sense, which is completely mischaracterizing the situation. Here, this is some footage we also took in the holy city of Najaf, and hundreds of thousands, millions of pilgrims will be taking part in their pilgrimage there to Karbala and Najaf last week and this week. And this is our journey there. The PMF units took us to a number of places, liberated ISIS areas, but they also showed us some of these important parts of the country, I think to give us a better taste and feel for what life is like in Iraq. And so we're incredibly hospitable and really took care to make sure that the journalists and people, the visiting delegations, were safe and so forth. But it was a great experience overall. And so let's just take a look at what the People's Mobilization Units are. And this is just a little fact sheet here that we put together for you, created right days after ISIS took the city of Mosul by the Ayatollah Sistani. Well over 100,000 by now, probably more like 120,000 man force comprised of volunteers from across the country. They began fighting immediately after formation, and the brigades consist of mostly Shiite. Iraq is mostly a Shiite country, so that's going to reflect in the demographics of this of the Hashd al-Shabi. But also you've got Sunni brigades, Christian, Yazidi, Turkmen, Shabak, and also Kurdish brigades too. So this is a pluralistic people's movement. This is a nationalist movement. Contrary to Western reports, they believe in Iraqi sovereignty and the nation state of Iraq. So this is the opposite of the sectarian narrative that the West is pushing. And the Sunni minorities form up to 21,000 members of the Hashd al-Shabi. So that's really important. That's something you won't read much about in the news in the West. And basically, they've taken back, of the 60,000 square kilometers seized by ISIS, they've taken back 90% by now, and Iraq is almost fully liberated. So let's take a look at the map, and you can see this. The dark red areas are sort of currently have ISIS presence in them. The light pink areas are former ISIS-held territory. So you can see the big difference there from 2015 to October 2017. And I think by next week or the next few weeks, Mike, that dark red area, that blood red area is going to shrink considerably. As we speak, both Iraq and soon Syria will be fully liberated from ISIS. So this is a massive victory for the Hashdi. And, you know, what can you say? They've martyred or lost about 10,000 people, Mike.
So we have some images.
These are from the front line, and these have been
taken in the last day or two?
Taken in well, this is probably from late last week. And so these are operations in Anbar and Hawija, recent operations, as you can see, just taking these areas back from ISIS. And it's important to point out here, when you look at some of these Hashdi members, obviously the military efforts are going to be front and center in terms of attention, but they're also engaged in essential humanitarian operations, Mike, and also really important, helping residents resettle back into their communities in places that have been overrun by ISIS and where residents have been turned into internally displaced persons, IDPs. So, you know, their work across the board, not just militarily, humanitarian-wise, but also in terms of helping to keep civil society cohesive. And because these are people who are drawn from the population. They're very professional. They fall under the command of the Iraqi military command structure. So this is not a militia in the sort of loose term. This is definitely within the command and control of the Prime Minister and the Iraqi forces. So despite what you read in the media, they're not under the control of Iran. So although they have gotten some support and some military support from Iran and ammunition and important equipment and things like this, because their arsenals ran dry in the country and their budgets have been running low as ISIS was just coming over the horizon.
So surprising they weren't getting support from Western governments.
Well, that's really interesting, the timing of how ISIS emerged and while the arsenals were depleted in Iraq. I'm not going to speculate as to the timing of that, but what is important is the emergence of the PMUs, the People's Mobilization Units.
Well, speaking of ISIS, this is Foreign Affairs magazine. Apparently ISIS is transforming now that it's beaten, more or less beaten in Iraq and Syria. Patrick, ISIS is transforming, according to this article, which some may view as being policy more than commentary. They're saying that ISIS is transforming from a regional threat to a global threat, and really we should be shaking in our beds as a result. But of course, as you said to me just before the program, Patrick, if ISIS is transforming from a regional threat to a global threat, and its means of doing business, shall we say, are changing, it's no longer anything to do with creating an Islamic State.
No, and it can't be called ISIS, because ISIS stands for the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham, or Iraq and Syria. Okay, so it represents a physical space here. And if you look at that foreign policy article, you pointed this out perfectly, Mike, that this is more a communicating policy than it is commentary of what's really happening. So this is what the West want ISIS to be in terms of policy, because this justifies a massive security apparatus and more overblown, bloated budgets on security across the board. And what this does, this sort of commentary by foreign policy, which is the mouthpiece
Foreign Affairs,
Foreign Affairs.
Yeah.
Is that the mouthpiece of the Council on Foreign Relations?
Yeah.
Okay, and Chatham House by extension. So what they're doing there is, instead of talking about this huge victory in Syria by the Syrian Arab Army, okay, and by the Hashdi and the Iraqi security forces in Iraq, instead of talking about that, instead of celebrating that, instead of giving them the credit that they're due, and it's really important they get that credit, Mike, especially considering Iraq's recent history and what the United States, Britain, and others have done to that country and created the conditions which have fomented groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. It's important to give them credit, because it is their victory at the end of the day. And it's a sorely needed victory for the people of that country. And believe me, they know that in the Middle East. They know exactly what they've done. They know what they've achieved. They know how significant it is historically. Ditto in Syria. The only people who don't know it is the people in the West, Mike,
Yeah.
because this is not being communicated, it's being obscured, and Trump's taking credit for defeating ISIS, and Michael Fallon's taking credit for defeating ISIS a couple of weeks ago, but they're not giving credit to the people who have actually won the battle on the ground. And these are the same governments that have been backing and arming terrorists in the Middle East now for the last 6 years, okay, arming them heavily, by the way, and training them and giving them all sorts of political support, various moderate rebel groups. So it's no surprise to me why the media is completely standoffish on this issue right now.
Okay, well, let's change the subject slightly. This is a tweet that went out this morning from Save the Children UK. Worn out yet? Children with pneumonia breathe this fast, and they're showing a video which is transforming from red to white at the speed of inhaling and exhaling as if you have pneumonia. And they say join the fight back against the world's biggest killer, because apparently pneumonia is the biggest killer now. So this is very coincidental, because the government and Priti Patel have announced a new package of aid to support in Syria to end the untold horror of thousands of helpless Syrian children who fall victim to pneumonia every winter, apparently. Pneumonia is an untold horror of the Syria crisis, she said, and helpless children are falling victim to the brutal assault of winter before their lives have properly begun. Well, indeed. Let's not worry about how much money the UK aid has pumped into the so-called rebels in Syria and how many lives have died, how many lives have been lost as a result of that. Now, apparently the UK is going to provide more than 1.3 million healthcare consultations, including 700,000 reproductive, maternal and child healthcare consultations. And guess what, Pat? We're going to provide vaccinations for more than 100,000 to help prevent infections and boost immune systems. And we're going to support 102,500 people, including families living in besieged and hard-to-reach areas. Besieged and the only besieged and hard-to-reach areas now are the ones that are controlled by ISIS. Is that right?
Well, ISIS and also al-Nusra and the other sort of rebel groups. So this is this term, besieged area. This is basically terrorist-occupied areas, Mike. So they're wanting to look after those areas. What about the other, the majority, the 80% of Syria that's under sanctions, that's under US and EU punitive sanctions, keeping medical supplies, essential medical supplies for the last 6 years from getting in that country, exacerbating things like pneumonia, okay, is down to sanctions. So
absolutely.
Priti Patel should be lobbying Parliament and lobbying Brussels to lift the punitive, unlawful sanctions that have been placed on Syria for no actual good reason to begin with, other than to sort of coerce the regime to step down, which hasn't happened. The sanctions policy has been a total failure, and meanwhile, the government's saying, we're going to provide this, we're going to provide that. They could provide everything Syria needs immediately if they just drop the punitive sanctions program, the sanctions regime that's been placed by the United States and the EU member states. Well, that would be my message to Priti Patel.
I completely agree with that, but of course, if Priti Patel followed your way of thinking, then they wouldn't be able to pump in the vaccines. And we've got to remember that what happened the last time they pumped in vaccines into Syria, 150,000 children vaccinated for polio. But oh dear, if you look at the UNICEF report, you find that a lot of them ended up dead or in wheelchairs as a result of it. Because what that polio vaccine did was to create an outbreak of polio.
This is a horrible story, Mike. We saw the same thing happen in India a few years ago, and this has been a repeated pattern across the world with introduced, somehow some people say they're introducing a live virus into the biosphere by pushing the polio programs.
Well, in the case of the polio vaccine that they chose to push into Syria, in that case, it was a vaccine which even the pro-vaccination lobby had acknowledged was a vaccine which should have been taken out of use because that particular strain of polio was otherwise defeated, and so it was being reintroduced. And there was a danger, there was an acknowledged danger that it would be reintroduced as a vaccine-derived infection. That's exactly what happened. But anyway, okay, let's come back to the UK. And of course, the biggest story that we could possibly be talking about today, Patrick, according to the mainstream media, and that is Damian Green. Now, yesterday in the Telegraph, Damian Green's friends, according to this headline, were trying to save his career by claiming that the woman whose knee he touched had mistaken his hand, had mistaken a tablecloth for his hand. That's what they were saying.
A rather heavy tablecloth.
So it gets even more ridiculous that we now have a second government minister, senior government minister, up against the wall for touching somebody's knee. We've got this ridiculous claim that perhaps it was a tablecloth and not his hand at all. But it gets worse because, of course, what then transpired yesterday was that a former Scotland Yard, a former Metropolitan Police, senior Metropolitan Policeman, said that when they had raided Damian Green's office in 2008, they had taken computer systems away and they had discovered what they described as extreme pornography on there. Sorry, some people are saying it's extreme. Actually, when the initial reports came out, there was no definition of what type of pornography it was. So it has now become extreme pornography. Well, this is a follow-up article from the Telegraph. The headline is "Former Scotland Yard Chief Says He Knew of Rumours of Porn on Damian Green's Office Computer." This is the man who took over from Bob Quick, who was the original Met Police officer that seized those computers. So this is his replacement, who is now saying that he heard on the grapevine that there was pornography. So now we're not even talking about fact. We're not talking about a police investigation which discovered certain material on a computer. We're talking about rumours of a police investigation which found certain material or may not have, but it's only a rumour in any case.
So they drifted it out into the media first. Is this correct?
This is correct. This is correct.
It's been drifted out into the media, and what are we actually looking at here? Well, it's unclear. But meanwhile, the talking points are out, and whatever's been done's been done. It seems, Mike, why has this been drifted out after 9 years towards this particular individual? That's the big question. Not what's on the computer, in my opinion, because it's 9 years old.
Look, there is an issue over whether it is ethical for somebody in a professional setting to have that type of material on a computer. That's one issue.
For any business.
But the fact of the matter is that Bob Quick clearly felt at the time, this is one possibility, he felt at the time that it was not illegal material. So it can't have been children.
So that was the determination of the police at the time? We
don't know that. Okay. The point is that either that was the determination of the police at the time, or the police have covered up criminal activity since 2008, and they have now chosen this time to mention it. That's a fascinating situation that we have there, and that's the story, in my opinion, of Damian Green. But anyway, Treason May then was talking this morning at the CBI, and she said we need to establish a new culture of respect at the centre of our public life. She said one or two other things, and to be honest, I can't be bothered telling you exactly what she said, so I'm going to paraphrase it for everybody so we know exactly what Theresa said. She said, "We realise that the Fortescue clip," this is the ex-chief whip, "is embarrassing, but we don't need to investigate that. Let's move on and make sure everything is suitably covered up in the future." That's what she said.
Yes, nothing to see here.
Nothing to see here.
And you can relax because we will be introducing sweeping reforms of ethical behavior in the House of Commons, and no one should be a victim of anyone touching their knees.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, a number of things have happened since yesterday Amber Rudd said that there would be an inquiry run by the Cabinet Office into Damian Green's conduct. She said that government is not going to collapse. Don't worry, Patrick. The government is not going to collapse, and that's because, well, she said absolutely not. I think it's something that will take place in terms of clearing out Westminster of that sort of behaviour, and Westminster, including the government, will be better off after it. It will be a positive thing, but I'm still not clear what it is they're clearing out. They're clearing out knee touching, but we don't want to go near the child abuse. Right, so we're not going to clear out child abuse, but we are going to clear out knee touching. Okay.
Yeah. Or tablecloth frotterage.
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. And the other big story, if you look at the BBC, in any case, is the Paradise Papers. This is another ICIJ investigation following on from the Panama Papers. This is, I think, some vain, pathetic attempt to reinvigorate the whole global taxation situation.
Look at this, Mike. They've even got a logo. They branded it. They've got a beautiful look for this Paradise Papers. It almost seems like a new TV miniseries.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, remember, this is being run through the ICIJ. Let's have a look at the ICIJ. They produced a lovely little snap view, which gives us a summary of all the key points. And who is right on the first slide? Well, of course, Trump, Russia. Russiagate.
Oh, I see.
Trump and Russia. It's pathetic. So let's have a run through this. So apparently a trove of 13.4 million records exposes the secret dealings and offshore interests of more than 120 politicians and world leaders, including the Queen, including the offshore activities of 13 advisors, major donors, and members of the President Donald J. Trump's administration. Right, let's go on. They've even got the Russian dolls. So there we go. So this is the leaked documents show that U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross benefits from business ties to Vladimir Putin's inner circle. This is the most disgusting fake news. The man has a few shares in a Russian oil company.
What? No, I heard he has a share in a company that has a Russian company as a client. Isn't that what the BBC reported? I don't know if he has shares himself. Anyway, whatever it is.
It's nonsense, right?
It's tenuous.
Tenuous doesn't even come close to
At
describing
best.
it. Yeah. There's a small group of people who are not equally subject to the laws of the rest of us, and that's on purpose, according to Brooks Harrington. Well, that's good. As I said, the Queen is involved, while the Queen's private estate, the Duchy of Lancaster, provides some details of its investments in UK property. It has never disclosed details of its offshore investments. So the Queen's let's face it, she is the biggest benefits cheat in the country. So it's hardly surprising that she's not paying her tax. But anyway, we move on. The leaked files show wealthy owners of private jets and yachts avoided taxes on their purchase of this stuff. So this is the standard of it, Patrick. It is top quality journalism.
Yeah, so was it the International Consortium for Investigative Journalism? This is as big of a joke as the Panama Papers. No, this is worse because they've sort of marketed it with this sort of sexy name, the Paradise Papers. I mean, what is this other than a distraction, Mike, from all the real things that are going on in the world? But it's not just that, is it, Mike?
No.
There's an agenda behind it.
No, but before we get onto the agenda, ICIJ worked with more than 380 journalists on this, and this is the best they could do.
And this is the best.
Some tenuous links.
And some fake news and shares in a Russian company. Russian dolls. Great.
Yes.
Good work.
Our work is not yet done, however. Of course not. But so what is behind this, Patrick?
Well, besides The Guardian and the Scott Trust and all the sort of the great and the good, what's behind it is, it looks like they're
reinvigorating,
rejigging the call for a global tax regime, a global tax system.
Now look, there's a UK column article that seems to have been published in May 2013.
Yeah,
we seem to have predicted this, Patrick.
May 2013, yeah, that was a few years ago.
Yes.
And so this was before the Panama Papers. And so this was what came out of Bilderberg 2013. This is one of the sort of recognizable pieces of evidence that came out about what are the really big topics, what are the big moves that were coming out of this sort of globalist confab. And one of them was Google was running point on this as well. Do you remember a lot of people out there will remember this big outrage that Google wasn't paying its fair share back in 2013, and you had George Osborne and others running sort of middlemen between meetings back and forth, talking to Larry Schmidt and between the government and so forth. So what was all that? But Google being used as the sort of lightning rod, just like Starbucks or Uber
or Amazon
is used as this kind of a globalist lightning rod for people to sort of vent their outrage on. At the end of the day, Mike, they will move their corporate headquarters to anywhere on the planet where they can get a better deal. So it doesn't matter what sort of pressure you put on these people anyway. And let's face it, we need the jobs in Europe because we've outsourced all of our jobs to the Far East. So we need these companies to actually employ people, otherwise the government will have to put everybody on the dole. So we're caught in this kind of globalization conundrum, Mike. And so what would the governments like to do is to sort of find new ways to extract money from not the richest people, Mike, not the 0.1%, but from people who are normal wage earners internationally and from the precariat class and others, because anybody with money is going to be able to avoid paying tax. All the billionaires and multimillionaires will find an island, they will find an archipelago who will offer private banking, and they've been doing this for hundreds of years, and they will continue to do it. We can't afford to hire KPMG to rubber stamp our audits for our corporations, but big billionaires can. And so that's what's not really talked about right now in the whole uproar of the Panama Papers. Did anybody get hung out to dry on the Panama Papers? Did anybody get arrested?
No, nobody did. No.
Did anything come out of that great investigation by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists?
No. I think at the heart of this is that the internet has given people access to information in a way that they haven't had before, and there are more and more people accessing trusts and playing the multi-level limited company game and offshore company game, shell company game. That was something that was originally only for the global elites. It's now spread out to levels where the tax implications are at a point where they feel they have to take action. So you're absolutely right. The people at the top are going to find some other mechanism to continue to behave as exactly that they have been. But that section just below, which is lucrative enough that the tax income would be significant, they're the target for this.
And meanwhile, Google and Facebook, Twitter, and others have global monopolies in whole markets.
Yes.
So they've destroyed any concept of antitrust. And that's not being talked about by any of our elected representatives. And that's one of the biggest crimes right now today.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to end there today. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much to Marwa Osman for taking part in the first part of the program. Thank you for being here today, Patrick. We'll see you again next week. And we will be back at the same time tomorrow. If you like what we're doing, please consider helping us financially by taking out a membership or making a donation. It's much appreciated, and we do need your help. So thank you very much. And we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.